Hey guys, I'm Sahil and I'm a co founder of Paradigm alongside my friend and colleague Rahul. Together, we created Paradigm to prepare you for change. At Paradigm, we aim to educate you on topics that are essential yet neglected in school and university. These are topics that are essential when you make a transition to the real world. This is a podcast that's available on Spotify, SoundCloud, and YouTube. And also make sure to check out our Instagram page, Paradigm EDU, for more updates regarding Paradigm. Today, I'm alongside Ibrahim, who is a specialist in the topic we'll discuss today and is a senior partner at Paradigm.
Hi, I'm Ibrahim Shanqiti, and as Sahil mentioned, I'm a senior partner here at Paradigm, and I'm focused on the productivity and cybersecurity topics.
And today, we'll be discussing studying tips for college with our guest, Aanya Bahl, who's a student at the University of Toronto. So, if you don't mind, could you just introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Anya. As Sahil mentioned, I'm a student at U of T. I am going into my third year at the university, which is both exciting and a little daunting. And I'm a double major in physiology and ecology and evolutionary biology with a minor in Spanish. So yeah, that's just a bit about me.
Sure, that's great. So, we'll start off with the first question. So, since this is a podcast about studying, we would want to know what are some things or some habits that you should have while you study, and how do you build these habits or encourage them?
Yeah, sure. So if I could give you like a big kind of contrast between how I studied in my first year of university and how I studied in my second, I feel like that would be able to provide a little bit of context to what I'm about to say. So in my first year, I was a new student at this very big university and I wanted to do my best. And in that process, in that thinking, I ended up spending a lot of time stressing about how to make notes, stressing about allotting like a big chunk of time to my preparation for my classes. And I was extremely unhappy because all I was thinking about was how to study. And I started stressing about whether I was studying in the right way, whether I was, messing up with my studying. And in my second year, I decided to not think about that and focus more on actually how I was going to retain the knowledge and just stress a little less. And it made my life a lot better. It made me get better grades and I was much happier. So personally, what I like to do when I'm studying is instead of allocating a big chunk of time to like, let's say I have a midterm on Monday and I said, okay, I'm going to study for this exam the entire weekend, right? What I'll do is I'll only allocate like a couple hours at a time and I'll take lots of breaks. That way I ensure that I don't procrastinate. Like sometimes I'll even study for half an hour and take a 15-minute break after that. But I find it helps me because in that half an hour, I'm so productive, I'm getting everything done, I don't want to check my phone, and I'm enjoying what I'm doing. So my main tip is to study for a short amount of time with many breaks and not to stress about things getting done, because if you study like that, they will end up getting done.
So, what are the things you shouldn't do while studying?
Okay. Personally, for me, one thing I would advise against doing is restricting yourself in too many ways. So for example, I used to be the kind of person that would put my phone away and hide it and take everything out of my room and like bundle myself up into a corner of my room and just only focus on what the material was in front of me. I think what that does is it makes you itch and want to reach for the things that you're denying yourself. So for example, if I say I don't want to have my phone near me because I'll keep looking at it, all I'll think about is my phone. It's like if I tell you, don't think of a pink elephant, what are you going to think of? A pink elephant. So I would say don't stress yourself out with that too much. Of course, this has certain, limitations. If you find yourself getting procrastinating, I apologize. If you find yourself procrastinating, I would say, change environment, maybe keep your phone on the side for a bit, but don't restrict yourself too much. And studying varies from person to person. So if you're the kind of person that can study with people, go ahead. But if you're the kind of person that can't study with people and you know that, when a friend asks you to study, it might be a wise idea to say, hey, not now, I'll hang out with you later, something like that. So keep it flexible and don't think of it as a rule you must follow. Just go with what your instinct is telling you, and you'll figure everything out.
So yeah, that actually moves us on really well to the next question. We're gonna ask you about your thoughts on group studying, because I know that's like a topic that's quite conflicted. People have varying opinions on it. So what are your thoughts and what are your experiences with it?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. I think it really depends on the surrounding, like where you are, and also the people you want to study with. I do enjoy studying with friends, but I find that the way it happens the best for me is if I know like these are the friends I can study with. So first, I kind of have that list in my mind that these are the people I can study with, and I either go with them to a coffee shop, or I love studying in coffee shops. It's my favorite place to study. Or I'll go with them to a library. And chances are, if I've chosen right, this person also has stuff to get done, so they won't distract me. The perks of studying in a library are that a library tends to be a very quiet place, especially a university library. So even if you make too much noise, you will get yelled at by other people or the librarian. So that is something that might hinder you from wasting too much time. Also, if a friend is willing to check up on you and say, okay, well, what have you done in the past half an hour? That's always very helpful. And especially during exam season, having a friend is great if this friend motivates you. But you should be able to know your own limits. So if being around friends is distracting, I'd say cut it out and keep a good number. You don't have to like study in a group. You can always like pick one friend or two friends, which is helpful in my opinion. Also, another thing is that some university classes have like recognized study groups. So there are people in the class that you may or not be friends with that are leading a study group, and you can go with them. And this is a structured study group. So, and this is very common with many universities. It's not just a U of T thing. So in that scenario, this is a person that is your age and is slightly more knowledgeable about the material than you are. So you can ask questions, you can collaborate, you can teach, but because they're not your friend, you might not get distracted, which I think is a great option. So definitely look into that when you're at university.
So I know this might sound a little redundant because you basically answered the question earlier, but like, where do you like to study? Where do you not like to study? Like, is there any benefit to some places? You talked about the library, or you said you like to study at coffee shops, stuff like that.
Sure. No, it's not redundant. No worries. So this actually ties weirdly enough into the weather. So depending on where you come from, like my family for the past 4 years has been living in a very hot place. It's always hot. It never gets cold. So when I studied in high school, I was used to the sun shining all the time. I was used to there being constant light in my room, and I was used to studying at my desk. In university, however, I moved away to Canada. It is cold in Canada. Sometimes the sun does not shine. Sometimes there's a blizzard. Sometimes it's raining. You never really know. So depending on the weather, I like to vary my mood, and depending on if there's a lot of light, if there's no light outside. So I like studying in coffee shops. I think coffee shops are great to get some work done if I feel like if it's a weekend and I just need to get something done, but I don't want to stay at home and do it. I want to be out. Coffee shop is the place to go. I also like studying in libraries, but not for too long a time because libraries can get claustrophobic. So like a couple hours tops with a friend. Studying at home is also fine. A lot of people can do it. If you're in a dorm room, things might be a little constricted because depending on where you are, you either might have a roommate, you might not have a roommate, your roommate might make a lot of noise, your roommate might be compatible with you. So a lot of people might not opt for studying in their rooms, which is fine. There's also common spaces at university, but I would warn out for those because sometimes it's a common space. You can't really dictate what people are going to do in that space. So if you're studying, be wary that people might, be having a lot of fun and might be making noises, and you might want to join them. So personally, I study in coffee shops, libraries, occasionally at home. And really, I'm creative sometimes. When the weather is good, I go into parks and study. I study in the lawns near my university. I study on the way to school when I'm listening to a podcast or, like notes that I've voice noted into my phone. So yeah, just keep it varied, I would say, because if you study in one place for too long, you will get tired and you will start to resent that material. But if you move around, there's less chances of that happening. And also studies have shown that if you move around to different locations and habitats, you're able to associate the habitat you were studying with the study material, which is apparently pretty helpful in exams.
That's great. Moving on to the next question. In uni, it's not all about studying. We also wanna, enjoy, have fun, especially after the IB. And there has to be that balance between enjoying with your friends, partying, and studying. But I'm pretty sure many people, like struggle to find that balance. They might gravitate, too much to one side. So how do you kind of maintain that balance?
Okay. Honestly, you guys, my first year of university was so unbalanced. I was so stressed all the time. I was only studying and I didn't have a lot of fun. And if you contrast that to my second year, I was having fun, but I was also getting really good grades. And I think, at least for me, I made a few rules that I stuck by, and that helped me fit everything into my life. So my first rule was that no matter what happens, I will have 8 hours of sleep, no matter what happens. So that, I know, but coming from the IB, it's like 8 hours of sleep, what? But it's definitely doable. And I would argue that my curriculum is harder than the IB. So whatever happens, I attempt to sleep by 12 a.m. and I always get up at 8. Regardless of if it's a weekend or if it's a weekday and I have classes, I always sleep 8 hours. So what that does is I have this time frame in my mind, and then I can work and play around with the rest of the hours in my day. So that is one thing. I also make an effort to do something fun on weekend nights. Keeping something fun in my mind for me on weekend nights is like whether it's going to a party or going to a art gallery opening or going out with a friend or having dinner with someone. It's something to look forward to, which ensures that in the remaining time, the weekday you always have something to look forward to. And then the third thing I would say is always schedule in some exercise. So once you have these three, and I don't need to talk about the benefits of exercise, you guys know. So once you have these three like non-negotiables in your day, you can plan around. And it might seem counterintuitive to not have studying as a non-negotiable, but once you have these three big chunks of time in your day, you can slot out your studying in different ways. So I always study like a couple hours in the morning before class, then I'll go to class to have something to eat. If I have half an hour in between classes, I'll sneak in a little studying there. Then after class, I might study before I go work out. Then I come home, I make dinner, study a little bit, do some reading, go to bed. That's what my average university day looks like. And you'll notice that I sneak in studying in a couple hours here and there, and without even realizing it, I've studied 6 hours apart from my classes in a day that I've also got 8 hours of sleep and I've exercised and I've seen a friend. So I honestly think that if you schedule in those three non-negotiables, exercise, having like a little bit of fun or me time, and sleep, you'll be able to study well and live your life well, as balanced as possible.
Thank you. I think that's also applicable nowadays. Okay, especially that, like myself, I'm going into DP. I definitely gonna have to listen to that.
Yeah.
So, just wanted to ask, how does your approach to studying differ when it comes to like an exam? So, like when like your usual days, right? You have to do general studying. How does it differ when you have an exam?
That's a good question. So first of all, I hate final exams. They are the worst. For midterm season, it's a little easier because instead of piling in all my studying at the end, like the day before a midterm, I'll just keep up with the class and I'll just make notes as I go along with the. So, and if my notes are good, I won't have to study more than 2 or 3 hours for a midterm. So midterms usually it's like studying for normal classes, except you're just revising for a couple hours the weekend before you have a midterm. Finals are different because for finals, it's a lot more material and you also don't have school, which is both a blessing and a curse because you have all this time on your hands. But if you're someone who is prone to procrastination, if you're someone who likes going out and doing things, and you don't get to see your friends in this time, by the way. I mean, you can if you'd like to, but in your classes, in your day-to-day occurrence around the university, you're more likely to see your friends during the normal school year than during exam time. So it's a little different, and I usually tend to get irritated with the amount of time I have because it seems like I have this much time, so I must schedule all this time for exam studying. My honest recommendation would be to mix it up more than usual during exam time, because this is also a time where you're going to be burnt out because the school semester is ending. So mix it up as much as possible. And always keep in mind that you shouldn't schedule in like 6 or 8 hours for marathon studying, because it probably won't benefit you. Instead, if you do like 2 hours here, then go work out, 2 hours here, go see a friend, 2 hours here, do something else, you should be okay. Just keep in mind that it's a lot of material and you won't necessarily be able to cover it in one day unless you do a marathon, which I do not recommend.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with that. I'm also a person who hates studying for final exams, and it just kind of it feels pressurizing as well, so much and so less time, and you procrastinate. But a question I also want to ask, and this is also this relates to the growing influence of technology and productivity. Do you have any recommendations to our viewers for methods, which could be any method or tools tools on the internet that you use to study or that help you focus?
Yeah, 100%. So my classes are mostly science classes. And the way science classes work is that, like any class in university, the professor will 99.9% have a slideshow presentation. And especially for science classes, and this applies to the humanities too, but for science classes, there tend to be a lot of diagrams, a lot of notations, and the material on each slide is a lot. So I used to print out all my slides, which people do, by the way, it's a very common thing, and write on the pieces of paper during my lectures. At the end of my freshman year, my first year, I found that I was spending so much money on printing, and it was obviously not good for the environment, and I had to spend extra time printing before a class, making sure I had the right slides. It sounds simple, but it honestly was a weirdly big stress. So in the summer between my first and second year, I invested in an iPad, and I bought, I can show it to you. It's literally the oldest iPad there is. It is it's secondhand. It doesn't even have a name. It's just called the iPad. And I bought an Apple Pencil, and instead of printing each slide, I have an app which lets me download the slides and write on them with my stylus, and then go back and make notes in a separate app. It's very useful. I do recommend it because you're not printing, and it's easy to write on an iPad. It's easy to take notes. And I really do recommend it. I've made some really pretty notes. I made some very messy but comprehensive notes. And what I like to do is during the school year, I will make notes on, in a class. If I'm in a class, I'll make notes on the slides that I've downloaded. Then I'll go to a separate page and, write them all out, annotate them, cut, copy, paste with the diagrams on the slides. It's very easy. And then at the end, if I'm studying for a final exam or a midterm, I will type them all up on my laptop. So that means I revise the material 3 times. And I find the iPad especially helpful for doing a lot of readings. I read a lot of scientific articles that I want to annotate, that I want to highlight. And I just download them in the iPad, and I take the Apple Pencil and I highlight, I annotate. It is very helpful. I do recommend it a lot. It's really saved my life. And this was cheap. If you get a second hand, and if you buy the most basic one, you can find it for a good price. But of course, you can get whichever one you want, depending on how financially liberal you are. It depends. But yeah, that's just my 2 cents.
I should actually probably listen to that because I still am a huge consumer of paper and I'm trying to cut down on that. So the next question is, do you have any different techniques when it comes to studying, any actual tools? There's one called Anki, I think it is. Okay, it's basically for online flashcards. It's on your desktop. Do you have anything like that? Do you use flashcards, for example? Do you use anything like that?
Mm-hmm. So I use a combination of study tools. On the iPad, the app that I have is called Notability. It's very helpful. It's a beautiful app, really. It lets you make a variety of different notes with a variety of different papers. Really recommend it. If it's a class that's memorization intensive, I always make flashcards. I use Quizlets. I also am a language minor. So for my language classes, this is going to sound basic, but I use Duolingo because Duolingo has really upped its game, and it has stories and podcasts that I listen to, which are very helpful. What else do I use? I also use to make my resume. I used Word document, which was really like a lifesaver. Word document has these like little text boxes that you can employ, and it helped me make my resume like efficient, clean, neat. What else do I use? For now, those are like the basic things. If there's any other kind of like method or something that I want to use, my friends are very collaborative. So we like going to our library, and sometimes there's a big whiteboard, and we write on the whiteboard a lot, which is very helpful. And lastly, your school library will have a bunch of books that I do recommend checking out, no matter if you're in the sciences, if you're in the humanities, if you're an engineering student, if you're a math student, because they have some hidden gems that you can. I've used so many library books in my school papers and my assignments, and it's worth checking out. So yeah.
Yeah, those techniques are definitely helpful, and I'll have to incorporate some of them to like improve my studying experience. But moving on, how does studying vary from high school to uni? So I know you did the IB curriculum. So how does it vary in terms of like the workload difference?
Okay. It really depends. My school is a big state-funded school. It's a big public research-intensive university, and I'm also the kind of person that takes on a lot of projects and work. One of the reasons being that university is a very easy place to get inspired, and I just like doing many different things on campus. So I find that I have more work than the IB, but it really depends from person to person. You might have less work, you might have more work, you might have medium work. The difference is that in school, you go to school for like 9 or like 8 a.m. to 3 or 4 p.m. depending on when you come home. And that is your school time. And then you come home, depending on if you take a nap, if you're not, you have a certain amount of time to study. In university, the biggest difference is that you don't have that schedule. You have the flexibility to choose your own schedule. So, for example, this past academic year, I had a 3-day weekend every weekend. And one of the weekends, my friend and I decided to take a trip, and it's very helpful. So I crammed all of my classes into like 4 days, and it wasn't even cramming. It really was like a normal class load. So I found that I had flexibility with the timings that I had and what I wanted to do with the remaining time I had. Also in high school, you get many do-overs. So for example, for people studying for a big board exam, like the IB exam, or like if you're in A-levels, GCSE, IGCSE, the Indian system, any system really, you most often have a final exam at the end of what you're studying for. So let's say you're in the IB, you have 2 years. In those 2 years, you have many tests, and if you get it wrong on the first try, you have the second try, you have the third try, you have the final exam. In university, you don't get so many tries. So let's say you don't get something on the midterm and you have a bad midterm, you literally have like, in terms of examination time, like the final exam to make it up. That's it, you get 2 tries because each class is in a semester. This is you have assignments to cover it up, but I'm just talking about like what an examination is. So that threw me off. And also, usually for these final board exams, the grade boundaries tend to be very high. Very low. In university, the grade boundaries are high. So if you want an A in university, you'll need to get a 90 or an 85 or above. But in the IB, those grades are like a 7. You're set. That's a great grade. So that takes some adjusting to. And when I was in the IB, I found that I could leave everything to the last moment and still get by with a good grade. I'm not saying you can't do that in university. For some people, they can do that, but it's much harder to get away with. And also, you don't have as many chances. So really keep those things in mind. That's why I used to study like chunks when I was in high school. I used to take 6 hours out, lock myself in my room, study for an exam, and be done with it. I used to like sleep 5 hours a day. I used to get up early in the morning sometimes for an exam at like 3 or 4 a.m. and study. In university, I do that less and less because I sleep more in university. I sleep a good 8 hours. But I've also learned to study smarter. And the teacher will say like, okay, you have 100 pages of reading, you have these slides, you have this thing to do. And smart students will know that if you're pressed for time, choose 3 out of 4 things. Maybe don't do the readings and like focus extra hard on the textbook content. You might lose a couple marks, but it's better than, getting an A than focusing on everything, doing badly, and getting like a B or a C. That makes sense.
Right. So now I think we're in an unprecedented kind of thing. I mean, it's been 100 years since there's been like, this kind of pandemic, right? And I think most universities and schools, okay, for the past couple of months have been off. Like there's no physical going in, getting classes like that. Has it been the same with University of Toronto?
Yeah, so I started the semester in person. Midway through the semester, I came home because all my classes got moved online. And then next semester, I have most of my classes online. I'm doing 2 research projects, which count as like, the university counts them for me as like classes. So those are in person. And I have a couple tutorials in person. But for the most part, my classes are online. Like it's an online mode of delivery, online lectures, online exams.
So how do you, as a student, how do you study at home? How have you made it so that you can, because you talked earlier about how you had your old routine. You'd have 3 days off. Sometimes you go on trips. You go to a cafe. You'd have this much sleep, this much this. So how have you adjusted to COVID-19? And I hope we don't have to keep doing this. Okay, we don't have to keep, staying at home, studying at home. But in the case that we will have to keep doing this for, like, say, a couple months or even a year or a couple, how would you advise for that?
For me, what I really focused on was having a routine. When I came home, I had to quarantine for 2 weeks, and in those 2 weeks, I literally had to stay in a room by myself for 2 weeks. I could not leave the room, and I had finals, exams, classes in those 2 weeks. I was adjusting to an international sleep schedule. So it's frustrating, I'm not gonna lie. You're used to so much freedom, you're used to going out, and suddenly all that freedom is taken away from you. It's not fun. But the main thing for me was like finding the freedom and the control that I had with the limited resources I had. So I would say, okay, you know what? I'm going to maintain my 12 to 8 sleep schedule no matter what happens. I'm going to wake up in the morning, I'm going to do a little stretching, and every day this is what I have control over. So that made me feel a lot better. With online classes, you have to be careful. There's this thing called screen fatigue, which exists, which basically means that you're staring at your screen all day, every day. Your phone, your TV, your laptop. It's exhausting. So I, for me, found like little pockets in the middle to like not look at the screen, and I'd instead pick up a book or play with my dog. Or this was after I came out of quarantine, but play with my dog or just walk around my house because I could not keep looking at the screen. It was very tiring. Online classes take a little bit of adjustment, but after you adjust to them, they're not that bad. What's difficult is knowing how the exam is going to be like. So your final assessment can go one of 2 ways. Either it's the same as always and you get a good grade, or it's harder because the professor knows that you have all the resources to your disposal. So they will make it more difficult. Some universities also have like proctoring tools where you have like a camera that's looking at you while you're studying. So I found that for some classes, they were more difficult, the final exams. And that took some getting used to, but also keep in mind that this period, like you said, Ibrahim, is unprecedented. So when you're giving an exam, professors, employers, many of you are applying to university, so you're talking about your high school grades, people will be lenient because this is not an easy time. And depending on where you are in the world, with what you're studying, with the level of education you are at, this is going to impact you in a different way. So adapt as best you can to the tools that you have. Like I said, keeping your routine intact, exercising a little, even if you can't go out, stretching, staying away from the screen. Those are all helpful things, but don't get too hard down on yourself if you find that you're unable to adapt as quick as everyone else, because each person has their own journey and people will be more lenient because of this.
All right. Thank you, Anya, so much for being here today and sharing your college wisdom. For everyone watching, make sure to stay tuned for more interviews from Paradigm. Thank you very much.